Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Colie. Today I'm chatting with Sarah Dumas. Sarah is a woman built in business, building her career from her pain and her struggles to inspire other women that no matter what situations you have faced, you can heal and rise above. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Nicole.
Of course. And I always start with an icebreaker question. What is a pastime that you enjoy?
Um, Anything outdoors these days, I would say for summer, playing with my kids in my pool.
Awesome. Yes. I used to have a pool. Oh, those are a lifesaver when you have kids. How old are your kids?
Yes. 9 and 13. My 13-year-old's going to be 14 next month.
Awesome. Yeah, you gotta have a pool, especially in the summertime. So tell everybody
Yeah.
about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Sarah Dumas, obviously, and I now help empower women to create seven-figure businesses without overwhelm. But it didn't all start there. I come from a background of domestic violence, growing up in poverty. Before the age of 19, I experienced a lot of trauma, that domestic violence situation, and homelessness. And so that's where I started. And my journey really started with the desire to never feel like I have to depend on somebody because my experience from youth just taught me that people are not trustworthy, people are not dependable, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And so I first started out like really putting money on a pedestal and thinking it can solve all of my problems and really finding out it doesn't.
That is a great realization because a lot of us, especially growing up poor, I also grew up in poverty. And when you grow up poor, you think money is going to solve all the problems and that your life would have no problems if you only had money.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, talk about, was your upbringing in domestic violence, was it from a childhood standpoint, adulthood?
So it was one of my relationships that I got into when I was started dating him when I was 17
Okay.
and
You want to talk
lasted
about
through before.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to talk about that because I think it's really important to highlight that domestic violence is not just when you're married in your 20s and your 30s or your 40s. This is something that can happen
Yeah.
to young dating
And
kids.
also happening to somebody who like if you knew me I mean, first of all, just to paint this picture, I grew up in a very strict Christian household. I and I think through my teens, this was part of my rebellion and all of the things. But it taught me so many things because if you knew me when I was a kid, you would have been like, "Oh, that'll never be her." And I thought it was never gonna be me, even while it was happening to me, you know what I mean? I was like, "This is not happening. It doesn't happen to people like me." And not from a sense of status or anything, because like I just told you, I grew up in poverty. I've been, my we were a happy family up until I was about the age of 10, and then my dad left, and before he left, we were probably like I would call it like poverty middle class. Like we're technically
Right.
middle class, but just paying the bills and scraping by. But when he left, it really went downhill. My mom's mental health went downhill. She ended up being she could not keep a job. She was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years and then all of a sudden had to be thrown back into the workplace while navigating like my dad literally left with no notice. It was like, "I'm moving out next week."
Oh, wow.
That was the notice.
And there
So,
was there no co-parenting? It was just now it's on mom.
there was co-parenting. He was in my life, but there was not help or support, right? Like I stayed with my mom and I saw my dad every other weekend, and I think there was like whatever Tuesdays or something involved there. I
Yeah.
don't remember, but it was that kind of style. And so my schooling, all of that, it was all on my mom. And so she went from not being able to hold a job, going in and out the mental institution, We were going to food banks, thrift stores. I remember like growing up, I had like 3 pairs during this time. I had like maybe 3 pairs of pants, and they were all from like thrift stores. Like that's and a couple of shirts. And like that's the clothes I had. I had no name brand anything. Everything was like falling apart and looking dingy, right? Like that's how I was at this point. And so I started working when I was 15 because I had to work. Like it was like if I don't work, I don't eat. There
Right.
was multiple times that there was no food in the house, just trying to get bills paid and all of that. And so um during this time, then I met somebody who I thought was great. Didn't really turn out to be a great situation. And like it started off with just controlling me in a way, but also subtle because I'm not the type of person that can be controlled.
Right.
I have no problem talking back, pushing back, all of the things. But somehow I ended up in this situation where I was like, how is this even happening right now? But
Yes.
it started with subtle things like, hey, I don't like when you dress up, like don't dress up to go out, dress up for me. I don't want other people like seeing you kind of a thing. Like I don't want any other
Yeah.
guys to be looking at you. Like that kind of
And as
energy
a
around it.
girl of a certain age, you go, "Oh, he only wants them."
Yes.
It's he loves me.
Yes. Oh
Yes,
my gosh. He loves me so much. He wants to
yes,
like, keep me all to himself. Yes,
yes.
exactly. And so it moved very quickly in the sense of I was only in this situation I had known him for a couple of years, but we were only in this dynamic for about a year. And I think I think that's part of the other thing is like there was some um what's the word? Like conditioning that had happened because I had known him for like 3 years. So he was
Grooming,
always
they call it.
yeah, grooming, thank you, thank you. And although like, when I hear the word grooming, I think, "Oh, older person with a younger person." It's like, we were
No.
the same age, but he was absolutely grooming me.
Mhm.
And during this time, it was like that. It was like, oh, I knew he was interested. I wasn't really interested in him, but he'd always be like, "You're so beautiful. You're so this." Like, can we like hang out? It wasn't even like, can we be together? Or this like obsessive thing, but it was just like, oh, this is cute. And like, he always stayed in touch with me. We were on and off communicating, a couple of months at a time during, these years. And so I felt comfortable with him. And then when it was like, okay, we're gonna be making this like official, it was all dosed in like the love bombing, the okay, don't do this, and this is where I want you because you're my girl, and like all these things.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I had went into that relationship after breaking up with somebody who I had been on and off with him in like since 6th grade. That's not really serious, but from
Right.
6th grade to like 11th grade or so,
Oh, wow, that's a
me
lot.
and this other guy. Yeah. And he had moved. So at some point it was, states away. But that's part of this whole dynamic too. It was like that relationship had ended and then this other person came in. And
Yeah.
it turned out really crazy because it took a while for any hands to be put on. It was like 8 months before that even happened. And what's really crazy about this is this whole time, I knew that there was another woman that was pregnant, and he had me convinced that she was saying it was his kid, but it was not. And he knew it was not, and there was no way it could be his, all these things,
Right.
and that she's making it up, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Well, when that child was born, that's when the switch was flipped and he started getting like thinking he could put his hands on me. And I was fighting back. Like this was not a healthy thing at all, but I was also not just accepting this.
Right, right. A lot of people think when you
Yeah.
say that you were in a domestic violence situation, you were just taking it. A lot of times,
Yeah.
not just sitting there taking it.
Exactly. Yes. And um so it just really became toxic. It was then the play of like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Don't leave. I'll never do it again." Like, I remember this one time he calls me and I hear the highway in the background and he's like, "I'm on the edge of the highway. I'm gonna step into it if you don't like take me back." Like he's like,
Whoa.
and
Yeah.
not to be too whatever here, but I was at the point where I was like, "Then do it." Like, what are you
Yes, because 'cause you're sick
good
of it.
riddance.
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'm not falling for this." And of course, it didn't happen and it was
Yeah.
just this whole thing. But it was really crazy. And there was sexual assault and rape that happened during this
Wow.
time. Yeah. And I think that that's just an important thing to bring awareness to, because just because somebody's your spouse, your romantic partner, your whatever, does not mean that they have full reign and access to your body, and anything that is outside of what you don't want to happen is still considered rape, sexual assault, whatever the level might be. But it's still the same thing as if, some stranger pulled you into a dark alley and did something.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And then it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to get out. During this time, within 2 months of his son being born, I found out I was pregnant. And then a whole new manipulation started happening and I ended up being homeless, and basically couch surfing with him. And it was not a good situation. We were, his house had been drug raided. He was dealing and things like that. And so there was a lot of negative things and dangerous things going on.
Yeah.
I remember we were staying at his mom's house, and that's when I found out that his mom was addicted to crack and doing crack in the bathroom. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there was just it was a crazy
And now
time.
was that stuff you were used to being exposed to?
No, not at
Oh,
all. Because again, I grew up in a very religious household. This was a new world to me. It's like, I mean, I'm not naive. I
right.
Where I grew up in a not great area. It's like the suburban hood. And so I've heard of these things. I've had friends, parents, and all, like, these are stories I've heard. These are things that I'm like, I know people who have went through. But for me to be in that situation was absolutely new because I was very sheltered from,
Yeah.
being exposed to that. Yeah. So I ended up coming back home, convincing my mom to let me come back home because I was basically kicked out. That's how I ended up being homeless. And this was for a few weeks. Um, and so I convinced my mom to let me back home. And as soon as I did, I found out I was having a miscarriage. It took a little bit, but found out that the miscarriage was happening because I was having some pain and they thought it was just a UTI at first. And I was having some spotting, but
Oh,
within a week, I went to another ER and found that out. And um, that whole instance was another awakening for me because I had nobody at that time. Like, he thought it was funny. He was like, "Yeah," like I had no support in the hospital. Nicole, the only person that ever hugged me and consoled me about my miscarriage was the ER doctor.
oh my gosh. Mm,
That is it.
I believe you.
And so, yeah, and so
What does that do to
while
your soul? Just if we can, if you can just recall,
yeah,
like, how you felt and how old were you going through this by yourself?
at this time I was 18. I had
Still
just graduated high school. Yeah.
young.
Yep. And I can like my body goes right back to that. Like I can feel everything and so it was one of those things like I say that the only thing that got me through that time was God and a notebook. And that might sound dramatic, but that was
Mhm.
literally it. Like the only thing I had to go through was my little composition notebook that I would just let my frustrations out, let my thoughts out, whatever. And I went into a really dark period in my life. And before I get there, I say, I was raised in a very religious household. I did not find Jesus until I was on the bottom of that bathroom, that shower floor, curled up in a ball. And that makes me emotional.
Yeah.
That makes me emotional not because of going through that, but I'm also deeply thankful for that experience, because if it wasn't for everything that I had went through, one, I wouldn't be the person I am today, but also I wouldn't have the relationship with God that I do today, that is like completely different than just religion and
Yeah.
completely opposite,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, and what ended up happening was, I was raised in the church. My parents were leaders in the church. Obviously, when my dad left, he was banished from the church, but my mom continued to be a leader. And these are people who literally knew me from the time I was born. These were people that used to babysit me when I was little. Every single person turned their back on me.
Oh,
Every single person was like, well, this is your fault for having sex outside of marriage. This is your fault for getting involved with this person. And you're just being dramatic. And did that really happen? And like all these, and I'm like, my mom literally witnessed the abuse. She was trying to stop it. Like, ask her if you don't believe me. Like, I don't owe you anything. I don't
you
like,
shouldn't have to
what is
justify
this?
your experiences at all times.
Yeah. And so
Mhm.
it was like extreme victim shaming. And I realized in that moment that that's who I also had been years prior, right? I was that person. I was that person that would judge somebody for like, oh my gosh, how do you even end up in a domestic violence situation? How could you even, whatever the case may be, all think of all the religious things that church is against. I was that person who was very judgmental off of all life choices, and going through this experience gave me the empathy, and that's why I'm so grateful for it, because I came out the other side of like, oh my gosh, this is what it feels like.
Yeah, and
Right?
it's
Like,
almost like maybe you were taken through that path to be like, "Okay, so you see the church, you see the experience, do you see who's here for you when everyone else
mhm.
turns their back on you?" Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So it's
Mhm.
a very awakening experience and something I'm very grateful for. Um, Through that time, I wasn't grateful for it in that moment. I became very angry. I became a my mom used to say, like, "You don't wanna meet you in a dark alley." Like, I wouldn't wanna meet you in a dark alley. I was just that person,
Triggered.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was a firecracker, like, ready to go off. And this is where in this time is where my husband found me, and it's so funny, like, he can tell you the stories of the old version of Sarah and how he used to hold me back from literally getting to like altercations with people in public, because I was just mad, and it was like whoever I had an outlet was gonna like feel my fire because I had
Yes.
no other way.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yes, I
So
know exactly what that feels like, and that comes from feeling like you have no one. The Everything's happening to you and it's big things. It's not just like, "Oh, I didn't get that job," or, "Oh, this." You lost a child, you lost a home, you didn't know where your next meal was gonna come from. All these things are happening around you, and you have absolutely no support.
yeah.
You get pissed off and you get ready to unleash on the first person to ask.
Yep. And I met my husband in a unique way where probably most women wouldn't put themselves in this situation, and he laughs at me and makes fun of me to this day. Like we chuckle about it because I met him on MySpace of all places, and I had sworn off guys. This was like I was still kind of dealing with my ex. He was still in the background. He was still calling me excessively. Like for me to have 80 missed calls, 80 missed calls from him a day was common.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, and this is after y'all are
yes.
broken up.
Yeah, well, yeah, trying to break up with him. It was
Oh
like,
my
yeah.
goodness.
So, it was just not something he was gonna accept. He was stalking me. It was all the things. And
Wow.
so, um, So I met my husband in the middle of this, and again, he had reached out to me on MySpace, and I don't know why. I tell him, God blessed him every day, because for some reason I actually responded to his message and gave him the time of day, because I was not there was multiple people in my DMs, and I was not giving anybody the time of day. But for whatever reason, it was meant to be. And so we were talking on the phone for probably about like 2 weeks. And one day I just told him, I was like, hey, I'm bored. Take me to the movies. And he's like, okay, well, what's your address? Mind you, this is the internet person. Never met, just talked on the phone.
Right.
So this is like 8, maybe even 9 o'clock at night. It's dark outside. I live in a area that, like, there's drive-bys down the street, like literally down the street on a regular basis. This is not a
It's not a
safe
safe
area.
area.
And so it's pitch black outside. We don't even keep house lights, like, outside lights on. There's no lights, whatever. He's on the phone with me and I'm giving him directions to get to my house. And he goes, okay, I'm outside. And I was like, okay, I'll be right there. And I literally walked down my dark driveway, open his car door, get in the car, and turn to him and go, hi, nice to meet you. And he's like, you were insane. How do you know I wasn't a killer? I said, you were insane for letting me in your car. Because if something was going to go down, I was not the one dying that night. I can tell you that, because I had plenty of fury and plenty of anger bottled up. I was ready to let it rip.
Oh my God, I love that. That's hilarious. But it's so true, because when you're going through things and you don't feel supported, all you can do is stuff it down, and then it eventually turns into resentment, rage, and anger. How did
Yeah.
you start to realize that you needed to find some healing, and how did you start to step into that? Because you're pretty young now and you don't have a good support system. So, what started to kind of drag you down that path?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I don't think this was I'm trying to see if I remember anything about going to therapy beforehand. There was no therapy available to me. I mean, at this time, I had no insurance. I was like, we were at that poor stage where you don't qualify for Medicaid, you don't qualify for food stamps, but you can't afford anything else. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You were in the this
Yeah.
part. Yep.
Yeah. We were like $100 over the limit. So it just wasn't a thing.
Or
So there was no support.
Mhm.
The people who had wanted to support me at that time, I was going to a clinic while I was pregnant, and there was a whole to do at the clinic with my boyfriend at the time, where literally one of the women pretended to needed to tell me something and called me into her office, and she's like, I can get you to a shelter right now. And I said, I'm not going to a shelter. Like, this is not, no, we're not doing that.
Wow.
This isn't,
So in
I,
public, there was no hiding
oh no,
information.
and he wasn't physically putting his hands on me, but I guess they could, like, we were having a disagreement in the lobby of the clinic. And I guess enough people saw it, heard it, like they could just read the body language. I don't know. Somehow the doctor all the way in the back section that was, doors and doors beyond, got wind of it and was like, we need to do something. And I just played it off and I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, we're not gonna. And at this time I was back at my mom's house too. He had just came with me to the appointment. But yeah, anyways. So back to the original question. It was really I would say I started to taper down after a couple of years, but there was still that part in me. Um, and it really was the birth of my daughter that completely changed my life, because I was like, this infant cannot have her mama go to jail. Because
Oh.
before that,
Mhm.
I was like, I I never thought I was even going to see the age of 21. And then when I did surprise myself and see the age of 21, I was like, well, I'm definitely not going to make it past 30. And then I made it
Mm.
past 30. And it's funny, because these time frames, I've realized I've had a complete shift. It's not that what I was picking up on, I'm very intuitive, but what I was picking up on was not the actual death of me, but it's a death of a past version of me for a new me
Ooh,
to come forward.
yeah.
So I would say 21 was a turning point, but I got pregnant with my daughter at 23. And like by 21, it was probably I wasn't so like aggressive. Like when I tell you, you could have looked at me wrong in Walmart and I would be like, what's your problem? Like I would be all up in your face.
No, girl, trust me. No, I know. Okay, listen, I went through some divorces and some new girlfriends tried to run their mouth, and I didn't care my children were standing there. I was ready to throw hands with, yes, I know exactly. I used to be that.
Yeah.
I call her old Nicole.
Yeah. I tell people, I'm like, listen, that's the old Sarah, but
Mhm.
trust and believe you mess with my kids, you will see that Sarah so quickly. Like
Yeah.
there's a part of me that I can switch that right back on and that'll all come right back. But
Yes.
anyway,
Yes.
but
She's
yeah,
just put down. She's not gone.
yes,
She's just put down.
yes. Yeah, back then I was leading with her. Now she's in my back pocket. It's like if I need her, I got her.
Yes.
But so I would say 21 was an essential turning point for me because I think I made that realization of like, oh, I'm still here. Okay, what is this about? And then I got pregnant with my daughter at 23. And even with being pregnant, I mean, not that I was trying to fight anybody when I was pregnant, but I had toned down between those years. But it was I remember I used to have really bad road rage. And
Mm.
I remember one day I got into a road rage incident that scared the crap out of me, and my daughter was in the back seat, and she was just a couple of months at this time, and I was like, this guy slammed his brakes and was about to get out of his car, and thank God, and he was like some huge guy, like I could not have,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wouldn't have ended well.
yeah.
Thank goodness the lane next to me was completely clear, and I quickly like just whipped around him and got out of there. But I had this oh shit moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm by myself with my daughter. Like,
Mhm.
what's he gonna do if he like kills me or whatever? Like, there's nobody here, and my daughter is just abandoned in this back seat. Like, what
Yeah.
kind of mom am I to like?
Mm.
I have to get this under control because that's not that's not acceptable. I can't have her. I don't want to see her through a jail cell. I don't want to her to have to visit my grave. Like,
Yeah.
something's got to shift. And so that was the biggest, really, I say my daughter saved my life because
Yes. Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. Yes.
yeah. So um that was the biggest turning point for me. And still to this day, like, I mean, I'm way better now, but like I remember I used to have to like really tap into that, like, nope, Sarah, you're a mom. Like keep it
Yeah. Yeah,
keep it
because in the
controlled.
beginning, you do when you're trying to, like, get away from that person because that person doesn't bring us any positivity. It brings us a lot of having to brawl with people or go toe to toe with
Yes.
people. And so when you are putting that down, sometimes
Yes.
yeah,
It's a relearning process and it's really conditioning because it
you have
becomes
to
a
tell yourself.
becomes a gut reaction.
Mhm.
When you're like really in the thick of it, it's like you're doing it before you're even like realizing it.
Yes.
And so it's really learning how to like tailor that and it takes a minute to allow your new self to start being the gut reaction versus that old self.
Yeah. How long of a journey did you have where before you started to kind of step into that entrepreneurial space?
Yeah, so I had my first business when I was 5.
Ooh.
So it's kind of always been with me. And even through this time, I'm talking about, being so angry and all these things, but I actually started building my first business in direct sales when I was 19.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's always been with me and it's always been something that I've done. And at the same time, I was also building my corporate success. So I was a master at masking.
Mhm.
And I remember one of my companies that I was working for at the time that this woman says to me, she was like the controller at the time, and she's like, Sarah, I just love having you around. You're so bubbly and blah 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 blah. And I was like thinking in my head, I'm like, I don't think I've
Are
ever
you
been called
talking about the
bubbly.
same person? I've had those
So
moments myself.
so I come home and I tell my husband what she said, and he looks at me and he's like, who are you at work? Because you have these people tricked. Like, what are you doing?
Yes. I remember having someone from high school say, "I remember you being so sweet and something else really like docile and kind." And I was like, "Really? Do you remember the right person?" I love those moments, but that shows how, yes, you're masking because you were going through something terrible, but you were also focused on
Mhm.
building your business and making a life for yourself and your family.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I never accepted my conditions as permanent ever.
Oh, wow. That's some of us in the situations don't have that. That's a lot of the thing that keeps a lot of people held back. Do you ever deal with women who have that as one of their struggles?
Absolutely. And um the work that we do there, and even for myself, right? Because like taking you back to that time where I said like I had my notebook, like I was there were several attempts to not be here anymore, right?
Mhm.
Like this was not, I don't want to sugarcoat this and be like,
No.
yeah, it was fine. And like there was all these things and I was perfectly
And I
fine with
found
it.
the
I'm just done
rainbows.
with it.
No, tell me all the dark stuff
Yeah.
because no one tells
Yeah.
you that.
Right. So I was absolutely struggling with that. And there were I guess what I would say like in and out moments in a way of like where I was like, I don't see my purpose here. I don't know what the point is. I don't want to be here anymore. And then I mean, I don't know how this shows up for other people, but the what I know for it to be is I felt that God was telling me like, no, you have a bigger purpose. You need to stay. And it was like what it felt like, if I could describe this in the most accurate way, 99% of me wanted to leave. There was that one little glimmer of hope feeling like felt like there's all this darkness and I could just maybe see like, was that a glimmer? I don't know. Maybe I'm delusional. Like it was like that kind of feeling where it's
Right.
like barely there, but there is just a thread of something that kept me here. And looking back on it now, again, this was not in the moment at all. I was just like,
No, it
I
never
don't
is
know
in
why.
the moment. It's never in the moment.
Yeah.
It's in reflection. Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm staying here, but I feel that there's just this little glimmer, a little thread of there's something else.
Mhm.
And even at that time I really couldn't I don't think I really understood what it was. So it wasn't easy for me to think about the future because again, when I thought about the future, I'm like, well, I'm not going to be here by the time I'm 21 anyway. That's like so for the people who are like, "Oh, well just think about what you want in life or vision or whatever." For me, it ended at 21. So and I think that ironically, that's also what helped me to stay because it was like, "Okay, well, I'm just 18 now. So might as well just see what else happens the next 3 years because after 21 I won't be here anymore anyway." It was like that kind of a thing where it was
Oh,
like,
wow.
if not now, then at 21. Okay, let's
Yeah.
let's just play the game. Um, and then as I mentioned, it was like I realize now in hindsight these turning points because once I got to 21 and I was like, that's weird. Okay, maybe I won't see my 22nd birthday. Like, what's going on? And I saw that and I was like, okay, well, definitely not 30 then. And it was like the same thing at 30. And I was like, it was just very interesting because I realized it was these turning points in my life. It was this next level of embodiment in what I was like, where I felt I was going, and just these different levels of like mastery of life, if you will. I don't know how like really else to explain it, but it was like at 21 it was that turning point of like really releasing that anger and figuring out like I don't have to be that all the time. I don't have to be so pissed off at the world. And yeah, I can let that take a seat back a little bit. Not that it completely vanished there. And then having my daughter was the biggest turning point with that. And then for 30 it was like I'm really like just leaving that past all behind and really this is where I saw a turning point in my success where from a money standpoint I spent a lot of time um after 18, like I said, I was putting money on a pedestal. And for me, it was six figures. It was like six figures were in shiny lights. And I was like, if I could just get six figures, all of my problems will disappear.
Yeah.
And I chased that and achieved it very quickly. But then it was like the roller coaster effect of gaining, losing, gaining, losing. And then at 30, it was this transition into multiple six figures consistently. And so even just looking at that, it was like those different evolutions of growth. Money was the biggest, I guess, proof of it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But it really came back to like who I was being, what I was doing, how I was showing up. Like I said, I was building businesses and simultaneously building corporate success. And at 30 was around the turning point of where I spent my 20s really burning myself out and in that hustle, hustle, go, go, chase, chase mode. And feeling like if I got more success, I could buy back the time with my kids.
Ooh.
To 30 really being the turning point of like, no, I get to decide now that I want this to shift. And it starts with me and putting different like boundaries in place, really even more so boundaries with myself of like not checking the 11 p.m. emails or not responding to emails at 11 p.m., not, working on weekends, like all of these different pieces that for me, I grew in corporate to the executive level. It can be very difficult on the executive level to try to put those things in place. And really, more so than anything, it's with yourself because you feel like, oh, I have got this level of success. I've got these level of people depending on me. So I have to, we're in that mindset of time versus money. We have to give more time because we're making more money. And through my own path and kind of playing with that a little bit, if you will, really finding a balance where that didn't actually proving to myself that didn't actually have to be the case.
Right.
So when I'm doing this work with women, it's really helping them come into this state of mind where we are in that future focus, where we're looking at what they want to do and how they want to do it. And really bringing in, I talk about like vision of self, vision of business, and then depending on what level you're at, like also your vision for your team and how all of these things should intertwine and actually make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes from societal standpoints and uh, really nothing else more than we just don't understand how this works and don't know any better. We're setting one standard for what we want personally and another vision for business. And there's just a big disconnect. And this is where we end up in burnout and all of the things. And this is applied the same for whether you're building business or your career. Because I did this in both. I started first with my career and then brought it into my business. And so yeah, it's really helping them see what they haven't seen yet and what a lot of people don't talk about. We focus on the strategies, we focus on promotions, whatever the case may be, whether business or career, and we don't give a lot of time to it's not even the mindset. I think we're over conditioned to thinking it's the mindset. It's really your energetics and bringing that trifecta into place, strategy, energetics, and mindset to all come together to create the life that you desire.
100%. Yeah. Mindset just a piece. I mean, I even realized that too, because once you shift your mindset, then you're opening yourself up and you're opening your business up to the possibilities of the other things coming in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. So, who's your ideal client?
Yeah. So, first of all, I would say women.
Mm-hmm.
And I am really at this space right now looking to work with women who want to get to seven figures. And so I would say you're probably at six figures or multi six figures, but some of my clients come to me even before they're at six figures. I work with women in a lot of different industries, but my specialty is within the coaching and service-based industry. And so, yeah, that's who my ideal client would be, a woman coach or service-based CEO who is at six figures or multi six figures and wants to scale even beyond seven figures. Because my background is in scaling companies to 8 and 9 figures. But one of the specialty, and that's more in the corporate scaling space. But in the coaching and service-based space, I have found a lot of success with women who are, at that six-figure type of mark, give or take. And it's really about simplification. A lot of times we're overcomplicating the process, we're overthinking it, we're thinking we need all the bells and whistles. And from, again, my own journey, a lot of everything that I come from comes from me doing it myself first. I believe in teaching from a level of embodiment of like, I'm not going to teach you anything that I haven't done myself, or that I haven't had success with somebody, with one of my clients. And so my journey here has also found that, like, I used to make things super complicated, and it was when I actually deconstructed and unlearned a lot of that, and bringing it fully from this place of what I desire to create. And again, those visions really being in alignment with each other. That's when I started next level success. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything you're saying is just, it's hard to convince people because we think if it's easy or simple, it's not effective or successful.
yeah.
And so
Mhm.
it's really important to kind of work with that mindset. Do you ever think or see in the future where you might help women or young women who are going through the life as you described it, and they want to become a leader in business, or they want to become a 6, 7, 8 figure earner, CEO? Do
Yeah.
you ever see yourself opening up to accepting those type of clients?
Yeah. So I have a heart for also being able to serve those that might not be able to afford or jump into something that I have now. And so I have plans in the works for launching a nonprofit that's able to specifically help women in that space, whether even focusing on women of domestic violence survivors that are coming
Ooh,
out and putting uh, what's the word? Why am I drawing a blank? Loan is the only word that's coming to me, but not alone. Like,
right. But
yeah,
giving them,
grants and stuff like that.
yeah,
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 there we go.
absolutely. I think that's great because when you're a woman of domestic violence, you go into these shelters, because trust me, I lived in a few, and you feel this big, and you feel now you've only left with just clothes on your back and your children at the sides, and you can't see what the future looks like. It just looks bleak. It looks scary,
Yeah,
and you go into survival mode. So I think that hitting them in a nonprofit type way and just giving them those little building blocks to get them to the spaces where it will lead them to that 7, 8 figure life. Because I do
yeah,
not believe that our situations dictate where we're going to go in our lives or finances.
exactly. Yep. And I really wish that there were more resources out there.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's absolutely one of my passion projects that as soon as I can, I want to get that started. So also just for your listeners, if there's anybody out there that you're like looking for a place to be able to make donations and put your money, and you're aligned with that mission, like, please reach out to me, because I want to build those contacts that when that foundation's ready to go, we get that fully funded and ready to support.
Absolutely. And I actually do some grant hunting for a nonprofit out of Indiana. And so I would love to maybe send you some links to some grants you can apply to if you don't know about them, and kind of get you
Yeah, that would be
kind of
great.
moving in that direction. You never know. I love those. I love that. It just sounds so wonderful. And to see those things come into fruition and be made available to people who need them the most. I think it
Yeah,
breathes a lot of hope into people who may think that because I was born into poverty, or because I'm in this situation right now, that's going to dictate the rest of my life, or my life is going to end at 21, or my life is going to end at 30 because I don't deserve, or I'm not worthy enough of living a long life and being happy.
yeah.
Where can people find Sarah?
Yeah, the best place is Instagram. I'm at the money coach 888. And then also my website, it's sarahdumascoaching.com.
Awesome. And do you have any plans for books coming out or any other like media that people can look towards and follow?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to offer your listeners my ebook for free. It's called Perfectly Imperfect. It's a short ebook, but also
Yeah.
transformational. And so, is it okay if I send you that link? You could put it in the show notes.
100%. Absolutely. Yes.
Perfect.
Share all the links and I'll share it everywhere too.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being so open and like kind of going really deep into how painful it started out for you and how you really truly felt in those moments and that you felt like you didn't want to be here, but there was that little glimmer because a lot of what you were saying resonated with my experience as I was coming up. I had been in those moments and always thinking maybe I'm not the one who's worthy. Do you have any final thoughts for anyone listening?
Yeah, I think that we all have our own divine purpose on this planet. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been, making whatever the stats are. We're one in a million or whatever that, if we're born onto this planet. And so really holding on to that and trusting that and knowing that there's more for your life. And sometimes it's just allowing for more time, even though that might feel painful and it might feel hard or annoying to feel like you're waiting. It doesn't have to take forever. Um, but can you just hold on one more day and see what's going to happen? What what are the opportunities out there? And the other thing that I would say too is like really actively listening and seeking opportunities,
Yeah.
not just accepting your current situation as like, well, I guess this is just what it's going to be. If you want more and you're here for more, letting that be the leading factor and trusting, asking God or whoever it is that you connect to show you the path that you're meant to be on. Um, Allow, things to come across your day-to-day life that are going to show you, whether showing evidence that it's possible, like hearing my story here, or a possible connection, right? Being open to the possibilities and not just closing off and being like, it's not worth it. This is never going to work. I'm so frustrated. There's the space and time for that, but also just allowing a little bit of the miracle to work as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you so much for that. That was a nugget.
Yeah.
I appreciate this conversation so much, Sarah. It has inspired me to just keep moving forward even in my journey. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Yeah, thank you.